Hi, I'm Bart Hanson. I'm the owner and lead instructor for CrushLivePoker.com. The following hand comes from our call-in show that we record live every Monday. If you enjoy this video, hit that like button, and if you want to submit to be on the show, take a look at the information in the description.
I do have a question. So I've been a longtime poker player, consistent winner over the years. I used to play full time.
Okay.
Recently, I've been in careers, so on and off, playing poker. I kind of got back in it online during the pandemic. So I play a lot of volume on WSOP.com right now, and I
Okay.
play a lot of. My main game right now is NL 100, and it's quite a big jump from NL 50 in terms of skill level, with the regulars being fairly good. It's a fairly tougher game, I believe, than the agent sites right now. So my question is, I'm beating this limit at a reasonable rate, and I do, most of the pots are in 3-bet spots, a lot of 4-bet bluffing, a lot of barreling, bluff catching, etc. If I want to take it to the next level and move up to NL 200 and NL 500 and higher, is it completely necessary to start studying solvers like PIO or GTO Plus, in your opinion?
Well, to put it simply, the answer to that question is yes. When you say NL 100, does that 50 cent on dollar on WSOP?
Yes.
Okay. So it's interesting, and I've actually wanted to address this for quite some time, Edward, and some people have asked me. I mean, I've brought some optimal solutions into Crush Live Poker training. There's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of training in the space. When I first started this back in 2000, 2013, 2014, I was really the only one that concentrated on on live poker. And, there was Run It Once, but that concentrated, on online poker. And now there's dozens and dozens of different training sites that are kind of into the space. And I think that what makes Crush Live Poker unique is, the live experience that you can draw from me playing, probably 15,000 hours of live poker. Whereas if you really wanted to get into how to use a solver, shortcut ways, things like that, I mean, anybody can
Mm-hmm.
teach that. And that's not necessarily my forte. There's tons of sites out there, that do that. But to answer your question, yes, I do think so. And I even think that even for people who play live, who, say, well, this is useless for live play, I think that that's actually the wrong way to look at it. I think that if you have the time and you can learn how to use a solver, even if it takes 10 to 20 hours to learn PIO, it certainly can be worthwhile. And there's a couple of reasons why. I mean, in your case, number one, if the game is tough, which it sounds like it is, you're probably going to be playing against other opponents that are trying to play at equilibrium and that probably aren't doing a whole lot of exploits. So you need to know what they're doing and how to basically counter. If you think a player is actually playing at equilibrium and you're faced with a tough decision, it would be nice to know to draw from some of the previous hands that you've run through a solver. And it's not necessarily the answer that's important, it's how the solver got to the answer, or why there are certain combinations of hands that are called, why certain combinations of hands are bluffed, the properties of your hand. The latest video that I did over on Crush Live Poker on Friday, this past Friday, was talking about hand composition, what it means to have a certain hand when you're faced with a decision, when your opponent, when you basically have a bluff catching hand, or when you want to bluff yourself. Now, the interesting thing
Mm-hmm.
about these solvers, and I had said in the beginning of sort of the COVID pandemic, that one of the things I wanted to do, because I knew that I wasn't going to be able to play live poker for a long time, and I still haven't, back since March, is I wanted to really get in there and learn how to use the solver well in the most efficient way. And I haven't really had the opportunity to do that because I've got two other huge projects unrelated to CLP, sort of in the gaming sector, that's taken up, a lot of my time. As we move forward, though, with technology, and I haven't necessarily investigated this too much, Edward, but it's my understanding that there are almost services now that provide you with like pooled server space, or almost like a real-time web interface where you don't actually even have to go through the mechanics of waiting and putting in the ranges in PIO and waiting for an output, which can sometimes take hours depending on the game tree that these things do a shortcut way of doing things for you. And if it can save you time, I would say that those things are probably worth the money as long as you start to understand why it's outputting what it's outputting. The other thing, though, too, is I would still recommend going in and learning PIO. But obviously, live poker is about, large exploits and things like that. But as the games get tougher and as your competition learns this material, I think you need to learn the material and able to counter it, to understand, what they're doing. I put up a CLP video this past weekend on a weird 4-bet hand over on TCH Live, and I think I maybe mentioned the term GTO kind of as a joke, and people are like, oh, GTO, live poker, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, it's not, there are obviously massive exploits that you can make that are going to show more profitability against certain types of players that are deviating far from equilibrium. And those types of players don't even really know what equilibrium is. But if you're trying to move up and play against some really, really tough competition online, absolutely. I would absolutely recommend it. Have you started to look at some of the stuff?
Not really. I mean, I have a lot of friends that do it, and they offer to help me when I get started with it. But kind of like you, my main foundation is really just to exploit the specific opponent in the specific spot. How they're running at the session and all that. But I do, like I said, I do want to take it to the next level, and considering purchasing a solver and really getting into it.
One of the other things too, I'll give you a hack if you're willing to spend the money. And I forget the name of the company, but you can Google this. A lot of the time, especially from a couple of years ago with solvers, a lot of the time, the reason why it takes a lot of time is actually entering like correct ranges pre-flop. And there are websites that have done super, super in-depth pre-flop solutions through Monk or Solver, which is like slightly different from PIO because it's using like a multi-way type solutions, but they're not cheap. Like you could, try to go to one of those services and buy like, 9-handed non-ante 2-blind solutions, right? For no limit. And, it might cost a couple $1,000 or $1,000 or whatever, but then you have all of those solutions and you can plug them right into PIO, like you import them. So, if you want a shortcut with that, because like I said, when I knew guys that were getting into this back in the beginning several years ago, that was really one of the most time consuming parts of this whole process, was getting the correct ranges in there. So if you want to shortcut it, I myself have learned quite a bit from Top Section when I used to host it with Conlon, our sort of optimal podcast. And I now derive my play or some things, even when I give advice, based upon hands that we've talked about. And we've talked through why the solver might call with a certain hand based upon combinatorics. One of the things I always say that kind of jumps out at me, and I bring this into my training material too, is that one of the most basic things, I always stated before computer modeling came out that, if you have an overpair like kings or aces, let's look at aces, that's a good example, and you're facing an aggressive action, on a board. Let's say the board is like 9-5-6 2 hearts or 9-5-4 2 hearts, whatever it is. We always used to think it would be better for us not to have the ace of hearts in our hand, because then our opponent can have the nut flush draw, which is good for us, right? Whereas the computer modeling, the types of hands that you want to have in that bluff catching scenario actually move from street to street. You would actually rather have, this is all derived from this, you'd rather have the ace of hearts in that particular scenario because of the backdoor equity. But then when you get to the turn, if you don't pick up the backdoor equity and now you're facing an aggressive action, now you wouldn't want to have it because you would want to unblock your opponent's bluffs. And then as we move to the river, too, in itself, as we move to the river, you actually, if a heart were to come in, you actually, you would want to have it again, right? Like if your opponent's representing a flush, you'd want to have the heart in your hand so that he can't have it. So it moves from street to street. So I would highly, highly recommend it. If you're thinking about putting the time and studying the game, absolutely. I mean, I think it's worth the money, and I would take advantage of the shortcuts too. I would do a little bit of Google researching on sort of the web applets, look at the reviews, And then also too, like if you can find a reliable site where you can plug the ranges in, that cuts your time by like 70% in the beginning.
Okay, got it, got it. All right,
So
I'll go ahead and do that. I'll start doing that.
yeah, I hope that answers your question. I appreciate the call. If you like what you've seen here, please hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this call in hand, hit the like button down below. To check out crushlivepoker.com, click on the link in the description. Use the code YTA300 to get the first 30 days for free.